And we're off.
Hooray. um, Welcome to our meeting. As chair, I don't feel very prepared today.
That's okay.
So, I feel like last night was a good meeting and we got some good data from Tony. I I unfortunately was not able to make the meeting on Tuesday because I was stuck at work, but it sounds like it was pretty well attended and
Yeah, I was pleased. We got like the news was there. It was actually quite funny because I had my son there with me. My wife was working in Amherst that day, so we had a whole handoff planned, and it happened a little later than I expected. And I kind of thought it would be dead at 4 p.m. It was
Mhm.
packed at 4 p.m. And so I went from doing that and wrangling him, and then put him in my spouse's car, and then went right back downstairs and talked to the news with
Mhm.
no preparation, but it came out okay. So it was a pretty good news hit on 22 covering it. So, but yeah. So and then as far as this today, today, I guess I kind of published like a very generic agenda, so we can talk about stuff that we've already talked about. I know we probably should chat about the event on the 23rd a little bit, and then um, uh, and just a little bit of like kind of cross committee update stuff, which I can get to. But and
Um, so the thing on the 23rd is happening, 7 to 9. And it sounds like, so I will meet with Tim McCarthy next week because John Hornick had asked me to at least include a little bit in what I'm talking about the unhoused population in Amherst, and so it showing like that side of the need for affordable housing. But I think it's pretty clear that like across the board, it's lacking. So I'm meeting with, or I'll talk with Tim on Tuesday morning.
great, and and Tim will probably be able to point you to this. There, so the 2024 point in time data is now published nationally. It's probably possible to drill down. Are you familiar with that framework, Allegra?
Mhm.
Okay, so kind of what that is. You should be able to drill down in the national data to Amherst, but then also there should be, and I think there is floating around an earlier published, three county continuum of
Yeah.
care report from many months ago. It's Last time I looked, it wasn't apparent on their website. I know that they linked it, but it did get published elsewhere, I think. And Tim should be able to point you to that.
Yeah.
But there's good data there as well. So, but yeah, is there other, as far as content, like, is there other support you need, or like?
I don't think so. I think it's been advantageous that the housing production plan is going on at the same time because I think they're finding a lot of data that is needed and necessary, especially some of the stuff we talked about last night. So I do have the needs assessment
Okay.
printed out in front of me, so I need to go back through that, but I do think that's a good source as well.
Great. Um, and then, we can talk about logistics. I do think it makes sense. Yeah, so I think I need to be there actually, don't I? Because I'm going to run presentations and stuff. So I will
And are
figure.
you included on all of John Hornick's emails? I can't remember.
Yes, I've been getting them now. He's been
Okay.
CCing me, so that's good.
Okay. Because I feel like I dropped off of some of them somehow. So I'm like, I
I
got the
mean,
most recent one that had like the unfinished version of the flyer, but I think for So it doesn't have the Zoom link on it yet, but
Okay. I do have from Rebecca. I have a flyer with a Zoom link.
oh, perfect.
Let me forward that to you. I asked her for that the other day, and she shared it. Um, Allegra. I'll just add Alex to this too, just so you have it, Alex.
Thank you.
So should we talk about outreach for that, or Alex, do you want to weigh in on content at all, or?
No, I'm sorry. I find myself like Allegra feeling a little unprepared for today's meeting, so I don't think I have much to add for that.
Okay, but yeah, and we can be brief today too. I mean, I think I think it's good to sort of just do the routine, the check-in, but we don't have to always drill in, especially since like we have a concrete initiative kind of rolling out here, and work's happening on that kind of outside of this context. I think it's totally acceptable to be focused on that. But yeah, but then I guess the other question is outreach, and I can advertise this with Samantha Giffen, who's the town's communications manager, who has proven to be pretty talented in spreading the word about stuff. I know that she kind of has to like slot things in her overall communication portfolio. So that's kind of can be a limiter, but we can kind of just spread the word informally too to different stakeholders and stuff.
and can we get the flyer up on like at least our page on the website, if not also?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can put it on the trust. Yeah, and I'll do that when we're done here. Maybe I'll just put a link at the top of the trust page, and send you that link so you can have you know a a web page or a web link to refer to. Although I can't, let's see if I really at some point I sent an email encouraging RSVPs. Oh, and you know what? I like RSVPs just because you can just track how outreach is going. Mm-hmm. What is tricky about this flyer is, let's see, we all have different skills when it comes to it is not linked, which is a little bit annoying. Maybe I'll see if I can fiddle with this and put a link behind the Zoom link. Because what I'm curious about is whether this Zoom link is going to require or invite RSVPs, or if okay, maybe I'll just come back to that. Because yeah, I guess I was thinking if there's another page for it, I don't want to be duplicative. Like did the league make a page for it?
It's a good question. I feel like I have been neglectful in my
Okay. Yeah.
but I can look, and I mean, I think that was part of their plan. I think they had a whole thing that they were trying to do too, in terms of their outreach. And I
Okay.
will
Yeah.
send you.
Yeah. It's on their page. It
Okay.
is. Although, but the um, oh, here it is. They kind of pasted it below. Let's see. All right. Oh wait, I created the Zoom link. Sorry, it's mine. All right, so I'll look in. I'm gonna make it to do to have some sort of coherent like posting slash Zoom link slash so it makes sense of where people should go online. Yeah, and then I guess like, maybe I would just ask the two of you, or maybe just say like, since they came to us with this, I haven't been like thinking in terms of like really, sorry, I lost my Zoom tab. Really bottom lining turnout for this, and seeing that, but I mean, is there, y- I think, I suspect in future events, we, especially those that we internally come up with, will probably have more intentions around like targeted audiences and, you know, goals you want to hit, and that kind of thing. I mean, but I guess I'd maybe ask like, do we feel kind of responsible for turnout on this, as far as like guaranteeing a certain outcome, or we want to do our best and hope that the league does their best, and like,
I'm fine with everybody doing their best. I mean, I
yeah.
do think it would be helpful from this experience to like bookmark, like, okay, these are key outreach area, like these are key places we would want to post things, like if we were to do something in the future, making sure it's going to the media, making sure it's going on the town website page, making sure, if it's in conjunction with like the league, making sure they're putting it on their website, which they have clearly done, that sort of thing. I mean, and I think, Carol and Erica, when they were co-chairs, had inherited John Hornick's list. So I'm assuming, if people are sending it out to their individual networks, like I personally am on like a parents listserv in town that is, I don't know, there's hundreds of people on it, like not necessarily everyone who would be invested in something like this, but you never know. Like sometimes
but
people find something from that listserv that you're like, oh, that's something I'm
totally.
proud of. So, I usually send out big updates, and like I sent stuff about the housing production plan to that listserv, just because I think, it's a way of connecting with families that are already here, or families in the area that would like to live in Amherst but haven't been able to yet. So I usually send things out to them. I know when we did a few years ago, we did a Human Rights Commission, CSSJC, the trust, and somebody else who
Yeah,
I'm forgetting right now, but we did a kind of a forum on, it was very informal, and it was, everyone shared it with their own individual networks, and we had like 60 people show up, which
great.
is pretty impressive. I thought. And it was, there were some people that were unhoused that showed up. There were some people that, so just thinking about, kind of, a, reaching out to somebody like Tim at Craig's Doors to say like, hey, we're doing this, but also like, do you want this to be something that your attendees can participate in? Like,
Sure. Yeah.
maybe putting a flyer up at the survival center, like just that just popped into my head. But I think those are like places that people utilize that probably fall into some of the categories of more marginalized folks that would probably benefit from having affordability in housing. So
And having a voice in the process, or learning
yeah.
more about how to have a voice. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, that's good. I mean, so I think like, I had a random thought. What was it? It was about outreach. Yeah, I don't know. It'll come back to me, I'm sure. But oh, I know the list. Yeah, that I wonder if we should think about in terms of this group, or what, in that, like specifically, I was thinking in terms of like sign-ins, if people sign into this event, like that might be a thing to talk to John about, or Becca, or I don't know if there's gonna be like sort of steering group, any more meetings leading up to this, or if it's all already kind of fleshed out and people are just going to show up. But that's a good opportunity to sort of get some new names,
Yeah.
but then that actually gets to the bigger sort of question um, of of who holds and
Mhm.
that list, and I wonder if we should move toward like Carol handing that off to Alex or you, Allegra, just because we're kind of in this engagement space
Yeah.
now. um
I mean, A, I think that makes sense. B, I think Carol and Eric are both off the trust this year, so not having it
so
with them would be important. But I think like having you actually have it as the town
sure,
staff
yeah,
person, because I'm just thinking of like the DEI department. Philip has started sending out a newsletter,
yeah.
um, and I think the requests have been that their AmeriCorps intern, that's the response, that's the person who's like compiling the list, but he's got
Oh,
this.
really?
That's my understanding of things
No,
from what
no.
I've read on the
I'm
newsletter.
like, ooh, there's an intern.
um, so I think just so that there would be continuity and it would be kind of institutionalized, should you ever leave your position,
For sure,
then it
yeah.
would still be held within like,
Yeah.
not just like floating from. I mean, it's important that a trust member, like, I think Gaston really should be a person who has it as like the chair, but I think, again, that begs the question, like, we don't have our own individual, like Amherst Housing Trust at amherstmass.gov email.
I kind of, yeah, it might be kind of nice if we, I'm not sure what the mechanics are. If there's like,
Mhm.
I mean, if there's regs around either town policy stuff around tech, and
Right.
also like, is there communication obligations, around that? I don't know. But yeah, it would seem to make sense to have a backup, like Greg get hits by a bus,
Right.
housing trust at amherstma.gov
Yeah.
address. That could float around. So maybe I'll, ask about that again. I asked about some parallel a while back, but okay.
But yes, I will. So I will send Carol, I mean, I'll send everybody the flyer. But
Yeah.
also I think I'll send Carol a specific email just saying, we're trying to figure out how this list can remain with.
And or be institutionalized, I
Right.
think is, one interesting thing, and it's sort of a separate to do, um, uh, it's more than a to do really, but is, I think there's a sort of, the original DNA, I think, of that list was, and I don't know, Allegra, at what point all this work happened and who was involved, and if this was in your orbit or not. But, at one point there was an engagement with CHAPA. Like, were
Mm,
you part of that at all? So
mm,
CHAPA is like a statewide organization, but, they were and continue to support different housing coalitions around the state, town-based housing coalitions. And at one point, they had done that in Amherst, and working closely with John, is my understanding. Um, I think, and the idea is that the coalitions are supposed to be like outside, of the formal
government structure.
government, so outside of the open meeting realm and the trust, but I think kind of my sense is what happened is because, John was kind of, maybe others were kind of quarterbacking both simultaneously, that they kind of just merged a little bit.
Mhm.
Um, I actually think I have some ideas about how we could sort of maybe reanimate something like that, or really others could, outside of the construct of the trust. And I think that'd be healthy.
Mhm.
So we may need to figure out with Carol, like, do we
Do you want to
feel
run the
like,
good coalition when you're done?
well, I mean, I actually, mentioned that to her, because I had gotten some outreach from Chapa,
Mhm.
and she wasn't, she was kind of a maybe on it, um, but and also, like, should we think of the list as the coalition device, or the list as as a trust mechanism, and um, I could probably argue both sides of that, utility wise, but maybe, so there's probably some group conversation to happen there, about what makes the most sense besides just the logistics of it.
No, I mean, I think those are important things to think about. And I do think, not that I want to like be, hey, let's violate open meeting law, but I do think that that I've heard part of the reason that like the Community Safety and Social Justice Committee doesn't have a email was like partially it was who's going to manage it and how to, then it's an open meeting law scenario and
And
like,
so you're obligated to let anybody subscribe, and
right.
yeah, so yeah, so we can talk that through. Maybe I don't know if we'd have to do that in the context of a meeting or if it would be a separate thing, but I can ask about how to approach that best. So okay, so I think then I'll do some stuff on the web, with the flyer and Allegra, before you start sending the flyer I just sent you out, let me see if or Alex, maybe I don't know. Do you have PDF editing software, Alex?
Yeah, I do.
Would you be up just to that the the email or the flyer I just sent? Would you be up to like basically it's an image
Yep.
and the Zoom link there is not actually linked. It's just text within the image.
Mhm.
Do you think you'd have capacity to edit that PDF just so that link is behind it, so if somebody clicks on it, they can go to the Zoom, as opposed to having to type out the really long.
Does this exist as a PDF somewhere?
Yeah, I sent it to you and Allegra a couple minutes ago. Um,
I think what was sent, or at least what I see, is just a JPEG, which I wouldn't
oh,
be
is this
able
a
to
JPEG? Oh,
edit.
okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
But
Yeah,
yes, if you can send a PDF, I'd be happy to do that.
um, okay, cool. Um, I mean, that might just be me converting this JPEG to a PDF, or I can email Rebecca and see if she's got one. Um, okay. Um, but yeah, my thought is if we're sending out something broadly, let's make sure it's clickable.
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, and so I guess one of my like tucked away hopeful outcomes for this is like also to let people know that we have this subcommittee that's meeting, and if they're engaged in the issue of affordable housing, like they can always join our meetings, and we want to include the community in this work. So that's tucked in my little brain.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a great objective, and I meant to actually surface that last night, but I think it's appropriate here as well. Is I have come across a couple people in recent weeks, at the forum, random email, how can I be involved? Like a few, and I think these are, um, yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this, as a potential way to involve community members, these subcommittee meetings and work. And so, yeah, I think that's a good objective. And maybe we can maybe that's an agenda item for next month, actually,
Mhm.
is to maybe talk more comprehensively about like inviting people in and the best approach to that.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
it does. And I think to kind of piggyback off that, I did reach out to Maura from the Indie last night with the unlinked flyer version, just
That's
because
okay. Yeah, yeah.
she actually emailed me. It was like, oh, let us know so we can get this in, because she was at the meeting. And one thing she had mentioned is like, it would be really nice when, if you're thinking about these things, not to forget that like the community land trust exists as an option, and we're working with like 7 families right now looking for housing. And I was just thinking maybe having like a mini series of like less popular forms of housing, or just like or like emerging ways to think about the affordable housing crisis, because I'm thinking like it would be nice to have more of a public space to talk about what Gaston was talking about in terms of the ADUs and like the funding stuff.
Yeah.
Thinking about like tiny homes, if that's a thing that we're doing, and then thinking about the land trust, because I do think that's, especially if we have this elderly or aging population that is like considering downsizing or thinking about other things, or some people are just not aging as long as people would like to, like
Sure.
this is an option for preserving housing for families in Amherst is like, you could donate your house if that's a position.
Sure, or you
financial
can,
thing.
yeah. I mean, there's, ACLT has, I think,
Mhm.
something cooking like that right now, which is,
Yeah.
I don't think it's done yet, but, so yeah, I think that's um, like those are great ideas. I think specifically, and one thing I think I put on the agenda is sort of like cross committee updates. I guess but it is we talked to and we did talk about it a little bit last night, but I wanted to share more formally here. Is like the development subgroup has talked kind of concretely about aspiring to an ADU specific event. And I mentioned, that I'd bring it to this group, as I think we could play a role in that. And the thing that I think there's probably space, and we'll see what happens at their next meeting. How far along things are, but it's probably space to merge the two groups for a conversation. And I think the one, and I mentioned this to them, I think, thing that's, I think it's okay, but I think it, is important. I mentioned to them, I want to be transparent with the two of you that I think the initial, if we were to sort of put events, and outreach and engagement and information sharing before, formal trust programming, like how, which is probably how it would shape up because formal trust programming would take a long time, but doing engagement around ADUs, is certainly helpful, I think, for the housing ecosystem, but it would be outside, at least in the short term, of like the capital A affordable housing ecosystem, so we'd be talking about, here's how you can connect with a private lender, or here's a private builder, here's what homeowner could go do on your own, with this framework that we're trying to educate you on. But the trust for the trust, there's probably plausible paths where the trust could be involved in a financial way in this kind of thing in the future, but that's well down the line. So in the short term, we'd be doing work kind of outside of that capital A affordable housing ecosystem on the engagement side. I think that's fine, but I wanted to be, sort of, I wanted to sort of share that with the two of you and see how that landed.
Was I making things up, or was there some sort of did Gaston say that the lender, or there was some way of like incentivizing some sort of affordability if, or
So yes, so we've been kind of talking very conceptually, about um how could affordability, how could like what I'll refer to as like capital A affordability or deed restricted, um uh covenants kind of, like the things that we actually fund, right? How could that become a part of this effort? And we've talked conceptually about a few different ways to think about that, and one idea, that we've been chewing on is a scenario where perhaps we, um, we offer, information and guidance to, say, let's say there's an elderly homeowner, who doesn't need their whole house, we assist them in transacting, not in a financial way, but in a, a technical assistance way, to get an ADU built on their property that they could live in, then there'd be an empty house available for rent, right? So perhaps there's a way to find resources for rehab, which we could then associate with affordability, whether trust resources or, Gaston mentioned a CDFI, series he's connected to, which is like a type of, community development funder, where perhaps there'd be an affordability option on the now vacant house, right? So that but even something like that, brewing something like that up would take some time, like the model. And I think probably in the short term, there's ways maybe to do demonstration projects that could be a little bit sooner. But I think between pulling in different funders and, figuring out, who is, accepting, because like there's sort of third parties that would have to do a lot of this work that we couldn't necessarily do ourselves. It would take some time versus, and I, and I think the idea for the horizon of an event is maybe a little bit sooner than that. I don't see any problem with that at all. My thought is like, you know, I think, in the grand scheme of, affordability more broadly, the more dialogue about these, the sooner the better. The more examples we have of just buildings, the better. And then, we can say, hey, here's this building that happened in a private way. What if we layered on affordability onto a similar building or a similar deal elsewhere? I mean, I think that would help the ultimate cause of potentially having some of these deed restricted in the future. So I don't think it's necessary to like wait until we have a totally tight plan of how do we do a capital A affordable ADUs before we start talking to people about them. But I wanted to make sure that so there's definitely a few different potential paths. I kind of described one of them loosely, um, but but I think the actual implementation of those probably takes a little bit longer than the timeline of putting an event together. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
I have some thoughts on that I'm honestly kind of a split mind about this because I understand that starting things earlier can be really beneficial. On the other hand, knowing that the town's ADU bylaw is not complete yet and hasn't been reintroduced after being hasn't been completely squared with state legislation. And then also knowing historically that towns that have invested a lot in ADU development have actually seen that increase prices for rentals concerns me a little bit if we jump into this without having like complete understanding of what that final bylaw is going to look like, but also if we jump into this without having a complete understanding of how we're promoting this in a way that's affordable for at least area median income. I like I said, I'm of a split mind because I think those are very real concerns that I have, and I'm trying to weigh with the fact that starting conversation and dialogue about something earlier can be really beneficial towards seeing that change implemented later. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
okay. Yeah, I mean, and I don't think, I don't think the development subgroup has yet said like, hey, education group, let's schedule a forum for X date. I mean, I think that they're still in the conceptual mode, but so I think ultimately this is more of a heads up and probably a more formal proposal. Might be a few months away. One or two maybe. Um, so yeah, so I mean, but I think Alex, those are like certainly things to weigh, and probably in conjunction, when they're ready, with the other group. Um, I'm curious about, as kind of as a side note, I'm curious about the data on towns focusing on ADUs and price increases, and like, you know, is that just sort of informal familiarity, or have you looked at more concrete stuff on that, or?
No, I mean we studied this in some of my housing classes. The problem is a lot of the towns that have really focused on ADUs have had either a really high tourist presence or a really high short-term rental presence in the
Okay,
town.
got it.
ADUs are like without other restrictions from the town, ADUs are kind of specially catered for those populations. And it means that usually homeowners who either live in the ADU or in the main building are able to charge really, really high short-term rents. And what that does then is push up equity in the neighborhood because it pushes up value of all of the homes, which pushes up like every other rent also. So I know California has done a lot with this, and obviously California is a weird case study for any markets, but there's just not, to my knowledge, a really strong precedent out there right now of a town that has implemented ADUs townwide and then seen anything even closely related to housing affordability come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some stuff that does, but I mean, I certainly short-term rental, um, like is a factor. Although we do have the option, I'm sure they will. The state legislation does offer the towns the option to prohibit short-term rentals, and I would expect that the um, planning board and council, I think, is the path. Would do that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess the other piece of it too, the other way to look at it, again, bigger conversation to have with the other group, but is these are going to happen regardless, right? I mean, like, this is more the development side, but uh, on the trust, in the back of my head, there's sort of, doing them at scale, monitoring all that stuff. There's not great models out there yet for that, for them to be deed restricted. But the law doesn't the law expressly prohibits ownership requirements, right? Owner occupancy requirements rather. Pie in the sky idea I had for ADUs was, if there's some way for the trust or the trust in conjunction with other entities to be involved in some way in, either equity or loans or whatever, we could make a condition of those, of such loans owner occupancy, right? Like from a zoning perspective, we can't, the town cannot uh, require owner occupancy. But if the trust wanted to say, hey, we're going to do a loan program for affordable ADUs, one of the conditions could be you have to be an owner occupant of one of those two. Um, so yeah, that one sort of scheme that I have, but I don't know how. It's pretty conceptual at this point, but yeah, so there's an fairly interesting like landscape to explore there. And I think part of it is like, if I think certainly profit motivated actors will act on them to some degree, across the state and probably in Amherst, so how can we kind of broaden it to a wider set of folks? Might be a way to think about it too. But okay, so yeah, that was the heads up I have from the development committee. In any case, I don't know if I have other town specific updates.
The only other thing that I can think of that's kind of a carryover is our little mission statement. And I don't remember where we were with that. Did we share that with the whole group? And if so, how did
We
that go?
did share it.
Okay.
Sorry, Greg, go ahead if you.
Yeah, we did and had a little conversation about it last month at the full trust, and I think got some informal feedback. And I don't know if Alex, you heard anything by email from anybody.
I didn't.
I think the one note that I wrote down the other day was, in transcribing minutes was Grover had suggested avoiding the term projects, which I think is a good rule of thumb. I also try to work in home for housing sometimes when I can. I think people relate to the word homes better than housing, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess what would you all, you know, should we think about next step to that or
So I mean,
maybe?
I'm just looking at it again. I wonder if where instead of where it says it's made up of town staff and residents who are working to promote affordable housing projects, maybe say something like working to promote building affordable housing that provides quality
or
homes.
or building affordable homes. Yeah.
Yeah, just
I think that I agree with removing projects. The reason
Mhm.
we hadn't started with that language is that
Yeah.
it felt really limiting to say that the only thing we're doing is building, which I think
Yeah.
isn't necessarily fair. Um, so I don't know. That was still the only note that I had down was change the term
Projects.
projects. But
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, we could maybe our next step of that is for Allegra to use that in your introduction of yourself and the trust on uh on the 23rd.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then
I'm
we'll,
looking at the thing again. We could just cut out the word projects, and I
Yeah.
think it still makes sense because then it's just who are working to promote affordable housing that provides quality homes for Amherst residents at all stages of life.
Perfect. I will
great.
make that amendment. And I think if we could, I apologize. I was clearly also not very with the program last night either. I was like, I don't think we've met since the last time I gave an update. And then
Yeah,
I
I was
realized,
very confused. I had just gotten back yesterday from like spending time with my family over holidays. I got snowed in the Midwest for part of it. It was the whole thing. I was very much not completely present last night. So,
so I think if next month when we meet as the big group, we can reintroduce this as, hey, we used it. It seems
Sure.
like a good little introduction to what we're doing. Here it is again. Give us feedback by, and we could even say by like the time that we meet in our small group,
great.
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
with
I mean,
like,
it might be, maybe we could work it into once we've had that sort of vetting period, and we could come back to it as a group next time, as a small group next time, and then maybe get it up on the website after that, and
Yeah.
sort of try and informally work it into our regular parlance.
Sounds good.
Great.
I have nothing else.
Nor am I.
I don't either.
All right. Well, then I think we can say see you later for now.
Can I just ask? Did we did we settle on this time as a regular time?
I think so. Well, I think we'd said let I think we changed from the first Friday to the second Friday because of the other meetings that were happening and thinking that
Okay.
we needed some other stuff to,
Okay, so I've got in the 7th then, which is the first Friday for next month. So is the first Friday good?
that still works for me.
That's fine. Yeah. I don't have class on Friday again this semester, so that should be
Very,
fine.
very good. Um, okay, that's all I needed.
All right. Well,
Okay.
see you in February.
Thank you.
All right, look forward to
Or
it.
hopefully the 23rd, actually. See
I'll
you
see you
the
for
23rd.
sure, for sure. All right,
Bye.
Bye.
bye.